Brother, sister, the way you handle money reveals something about your actual faith that your words in church on a Sunday morning never quite will. Jesus talked about money more than almost any other subject in the Gospels, more than heaven, more than hell, more than prayer itself, which alone should tell us something about how seriously our finances actually deserve to be examined. And yet many believers treat their finances as a private, almost secular matter, disconnected from their actual spiritual life, as though God's concerns stopped at the edge of the offering plate. That disconnect is exactly where danger tends to creep in. Today we're naming 6 dangerous things Christians commonly do with their money, habits that often go completely unquestioned inside church culture, precisely because they're wrapped in spiritual-sounding language that makes them feel exempt from ordinary scrutiny. This isn't about shaming anyone's financial situation, whatever it currently looks like right now. It's about examining whether our money habits actually reflect wisdom and trust, or whether they've quietly become something else entirely. Stay with me. Some of these patterns are so normalized that you may not have ever thought to question them. Think about your own last month of spending, saving, giving, and lending, exactly as it actually happened, not as you'd prefer to remember it. Not what you'd say about your relationship with money if someone asked you directly, but what your bank statement would actually reveal if it could speak for you. That gap between our stated theology of money and our actual lived behavior with it is exactly where this conversation needs to begin, uncomfortable as that honest comparison might turn out to be. The first danger is treating tithing like a transaction, a seed planted specifically to guarantee a financial harvest in return. Give and it will come back to you multiplied. Gets preached in some circles almost like a financial contract with God, rather than an act of worship and trust. But genuine biblical giving was never actually meant to function like a calculated investment strategy with a guaranteed rate of return attached. When giving becomes primarily about what you expect to receive back, it stopped being generosity and quietly become a transaction dressed in spiritual language. Real giving flows from gratitude and trust, not from a calculated bet on guaranteed returns. Consider how differently giving feels over time when the expected return doesn't materialize the way it was quietly promised or assumed. If your tithe was really an investment expecting a specific payout, disappointment or even resentment tends to follow when the financial harvest doesn't show up on your preferred timeline. But if your giving was genuine worship all along, its value was never actually contingent on what came back to you. The absence of return reveals more clearly than anything else which kind of giving you were actually practicing. The second danger is co-signing loans or lending money unwisely, especially to family, without genuine wisdom. Scripture actually contains direct, specific warnings about the danger of becoming surety for another person's debt, putting yourself financially at risk for someone else's obligation. But inside families and churches, saying no to a loan request can feel unloving, even unspiritual, as though real faith requires saying yes, regardless of the wisdom involved. Generosity and financial recklessness are not the same thing. Sometimes the most loving answer is a boundary, not a blank check. Think about how many family relationships have actually been damaged, not by a loan refused, but by a loan given unwisely and later defaulted on, turning a simple financial transaction into years of resentment and broken trust. Wisdom in lending isn't the absence of generosity. It's often what actually protects the relationship in the long run, precisely because it refuses to let money become a source of quiet, lasting bitterness between people who are supposed to love each other well. The third danger is living a debt-driven lifestyle while calling it faith. Overspending, presuming on next month's income, treating credit as though it were simply an extension of God's provision, rather than a genuine financial risk. This pattern gets spiritualized more often than you'd expect. God will provide sometimes gets used to justify decisions that have nothing to do with faith and everything to do with poor planning. Trusting God was never meant to replace wisdom. It was meant to work alongside it. Notice the specific language that tends to accompany this pattern. God will make a way, spoken not after wise planning, but instead of it, used to justify a purchase or a financial risk that any objective advisor would flag as reckless. Faith and financial wisdom were never actually in competition with each other throughout Scripture. The same God who provides also gave us the capacity for planning, and treating one as though it excused the other quietly distorts both. The fourth danger is public giving used as a status symbol rather than genuine generosity. Named plaques, publicly announced pledges, giving amounts that seem calibrated more for recognition than for actual impact. This pattern quietly turns generosity into a performance. Jesus specifically warned against giving to be seen by others. promising that the applause itself becomes the entire reward, with nothing left over from God. Genuine generosity rarely needs an audience. When the giving requires recognition to feel worthwhile, something essential about its original purpose has already been lost. A simple test can help here. Would you still give the same amount in the same way if absolutely no one else would ever know about it? If the honest answer changes depending on visibility, that's worth examining carefully. The most genuinely generous givers in Scripture are often the ones we know the least about by name, precisely because their giving was never actually about being known for it in the first place. The fifth danger is treating God will provide as an excuse for refusing to plan or save at all. There's a real difference between trusting God and simply avoiding the responsibility of wise stewardship. Scripture actually praises diligent planning, comparing the wise to an ant that stores up provision ahead of need. Faith was never meant to replace practical wisdom. Using spiritual language to avoid budgeting, saving, or planning isn't trust. It's often simply poor stewardship wearing a more comfortable sounding name. Consider what actually happens to a family when a genuine emergency arrives and no planning was ever done to prepare for it. The scramble that follows rarely feels like a genuine opportunity to witness God's provision in real time. It often feels like genuine chaos, made significantly worse by choices that could have been easily avoided with basic foresight and simple planning. Trusting God for tomorrow was never meant to excuse neglecting the wisdom that's genuinely available to you today, right now, in this present season. And the sixth, maybe the most quietly corrosive of all, financial comparison and competition happening within the church community itself. Keeping up appearances among fellow believers, matching someone else's house, their vacations, their giving amount, their visible lifestyle, turns money into a quiet scoreboard inside the very community that's supposed to be free from that kind of comparison. Scripture consistently warns against envy and comparison. Yet church communities can become one of the most pressure-filled places for exactly this kind of financial competition, precisely because everyone involved is trying to look faithful at the same time. Notice how quietly this comparison operates, rarely spoken aloud but constantly felt. A glance at someone else's new car in the church parking lot, a subtle awareness of who gave what during a building campaign, an unspoken ranking system nobody would ever admit exists, but that shapes real decisions anyway. Community was meant to free people from exactly this kind of pressure, not become one more arena where it quietly plays out. So what does it actually look like to handle money in a way that reflects genuine faith rather than these 6 dangers? It looks like giving from gratitude, not from a calculated expectation of return. It looks like lending wisely, with real boundaries in place. It looks like trusting God while still planning responsibly, not using faith as an excuse for recklessness. It looks like generosity that doesn't need an audience. It looks like diligent stewardship instead of passive avoidance, dressed up as trust. And it looks like refusing the quiet scoreboard of financial comparison inside your own church community. None of this means money itself is dangerous, or that wanting financial stability is somehow unspiritual. Wanting to provide well for your family, wanting to be free from the crushing weight of debt, wanting to give generously and wisely. None of these desires are anything other than good. But how we actually handle money, the habits so normal we rarely examine them, often reveals far more about our real trust in God than anything we'd say out loud on a Sunday morning, however sincere those words might genuinely be in the moment. So this week, look honestly at one financial habit you've never really questioned. Ask whether it flows from genuine faith and wisdom, or whether it's quietly become something else, dressed up in spiritual language, that's never actually been tested. Here's a simple diagnostic for each of these 6 dangers, if you want somewhere concrete to start. For transactional tithing, would you still give the same way if you were absolutely certain no financial return would ever follow? For unwise lending, has a specific loan or co-signing decision been driven by genuine wisdom or by the fear of appearing unloving if you said no? For debt-driven living, is there a purchase currently on your calendar or already made that you've justified with faith language rather than honest budgeting? For public giving, does your generosity change in size or visibility depending on who's watching? For refusing to plan, what would happen to your family financially if a real emergency arrived tomorrow? And is that scenario something you've actually prepared for, or simply hope to avoid? For financial comparison, whose lifestyle have you found yourself quietly measuring your own against recently, inside your own church community? None of these questions are meant to produce shame about your current financial situation, wherever it happens to be. Financial hardship is not evidence of spiritual failure, any more than financial comfort is automatic evidence of spiritual success. The danger was never in having money or lacking it. It's in the specific habits, the transactional giving, the unwise lending, the debt disguised as faith, the performance of generosity, the avoidance disguised as trust, the quiet comparison that quietly distort what money was actually meant to do in a believer's life. Consider how differently a household actually operates once these 6 dangers are named clearly and examined honestly, rather than left unexamined simply because they're so common. Giving becomes lighter, freed from the weight of expected return. Lending becomes wiser, protected by genuine boundaries rather than guilt. Spending becomes more honest, no longer hiding behind borrowed spiritual language. Generosity becomes quieter and, in a strange way, often becomes more genuine precisely because it's no longer performing for anyone. Planning becomes an act of stewardship rather than a lack of trust. And comparison loses its grip, replaced by contentment that no longer depends on matching anyone else's visible lifestyle. This kind of examination rarely happens all at once. It tends to happen one honest financial decision at a time, one budget conversation at a time, slowly and deliberately. One moment of choosing wisdom over either recklessness or fear. But it starts with simply being willing to look, clearly and honestly, at habits that have often gone completely unquestioned for years. If this stirred something in you, brother, sister, don't scroll past it. Subscribe to Biblical Warning now, and let's keep examining these hidden places together, one warning at a time.